Beethoven arrived in Vienna in November 1792, not quite 22 years old. Mozart had died 11 months earlier, and Haydn had just returned from his first superstar residency in London. Vienna was the place to be for a young musician like Beethoven, who was known as a promising composer, but a pianist of the first rank, with a phenomenal talent for improvisation, creating musical fantasies on the spot as he played. But his talent for real composition had barely been tapped at this young age. That would take more time, more study, more development. Beethoven, born in December of 1770 and raised in Bonn, Germany. His grandfather Ludwig was the local Kapellmeister, or music director, a powerful and influential man who died when Beethoven was only 3. Beethoven's father, Johann, also was a court musician, but fate seems to have skipped a generation in terms of real talent, since Johann was merely competent. He also became known as a heavy drinker and something of a local character. Not surprisingly, Johann tended to take out his own failures on his son, Ludwig, our guy, and was a strict, unyielding, and even cruel teacher, and was especially intolerant of young Ludwig's skill at improvisation. Parental jealousy, I imagine.
Wow, and with that, we've kick-started the first symphony, the first part of the first symphony. Amazing.
That's right, and I love how Lawrence Rapchak introduces us to the scene, to the background of where that symphony came from, and what was Beethoven's background. I mean, if you go to any study on Beethoven's biography, you have to read through pages and pages and pages and pages and pages and pages to get to the point where she went to Vienna. And it's incredible how Lawrence has that insight at finding and bringing to our attention the facts and the events of Beethoven's life, and who he met, how he met people, what he took from that, and what was his social life, what was his standing, what was his approach, and puts it in a fleeting couple of minutes of just a brief introduction, immerses us in that moment, in that time period in which Beethoven was writing and preparing for his big entrance on the scene with the first monumental work of that scope, a symphony.
Yeah, so let's take some time to summarize for everybody. So we have this grandfather, a Kapellmeister, so renowned, respected musician. And then it skips a generation, obviously, because Johann Beethoven was a court musician, but merely competent, a bit of a heavy drinker, local character, and a strict and unyielding father, apparently. So we know from that already the summary of Beethoven's background and who he was, and that picture of Beethoven we saw, he's quite a handsome young man, and so he goes off to Vienna at the age of about 22 or so, and he studies with Haydn for a while, and here we are producing the first symphony at Opus 21, which means that he's already composed at least 21 significant pieces of music to be published before he puts his first symphony down.
Haydn definitely helped guide the young Beethoven in marshaling his creative powers into music of cohesion, invention, and architectural proportion. And then there's this. A most striking but subtle announcement to the musical world. Odd that the most titanic musical mind of the century avoided the grand, heaven-storming, dramatic gesture to impress his audience. Beethoven clearly felt he didn't need that, and wisely decided not to overdo it. But whatever his thinking, here it is again. The dawn of the new century, which fueled Beethoven's creative powers as he now shifted into high gear, producing piano sonatas, concerti, his first string quartets, his famous septet, and his first symphony, a form that every serious composer had to tackle. And it might be surprising to learn that there were very few established public concerts at this time in Vienna. Orchestras were still the property of the royalty. And even though this had started to change, a composer still had to organize and fund his own concerts in order to hear his large-scale works. These concerts were called academies. Mozart did them often. It's astounding to think that the greatest symphonic and choral masterworks of all time were only heard by audiences because the composer himself went out and raised the money, including the premiere of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony in 1824. Yeah, that one, yes. So generous support of wealthy patrons was essential. And in that regard, Beethoven was well served and well connected. But he still had to sell tickets out of his apartment for his own first big Academy concert, which took place on Wednesday, April 2nd, 1800, his real coming out into society. And since these events showcased a composer's new output but could only be produced occasionally, they were usually very long concerts, jammed full of as yet unheard music.
Another interesting fact about Beethoven earning his reputation as an improviser. So, as a virtuoso pianist who sat down at the piano and impressed everyone around by being able to improvise on the spot. And that also turns things around and explains his standing, the social standing, which was extremely important then, and I want to say it's as important, the networking is important today, of course, in a different way. But back then that was crucial because Beethoven had to not only compose the symphony, not only prepare it for publication and do all the copies for all the musicians, he had to do fundraising in order for that symphony to be performed. That's a very important, interesting fact. So at 20-something, Beethoven was not only composing at this level, he was already an entrepreneur organizing, and probably that fundraising effort took him just as long as writing the symphony.
That's incredible that you think about artists and composers these days who may be complaining, oh, I'm not getting enough concerts, not enough people preparing my works, and yet these people, this Beethoven, this legend of our time, is raising money to get his music performed in big public concerts. Because not to forget that, and Larry Rapchak highlights this, most concerts were for the aristocrats. So to actually have concerts for the bigger public, to get everybody in a big space, meant you really had to fundraise and do it all on your own. So you could get the music heard, and then you get the newspapers talking about it, the people talking about it. You get this idea that Beethoven was a composer for the people, because he wanted many people to listen to his music. And so it requires so much to just get this first symphony out. Not just the composition part of it, but the fundraising and the frustration with the musicians, the rehearsing, everything.
So the final offering in this big concert was Beethoven's new First Symphony, maybe a bit cautious in its musical idiom, maybe not. Still, Beethoven honors tradition by opening the symphony with a slow introduction, as did Haydn. But to announce yourself to the musical world in such an understated, almost offhand way was remarkable, so unconventional, even a bit revolutionary. The audacity of those two chords is, I think, the first of many such features that we will encounter in Beethoven's symphonies. Since when does a work begin with an unresolved chord? A dominant chord, we call it dominant seventh, because of this interval is 7 notes apart, and the dominant chord must lead to the tonic, or the home key. It's that old polarity thing that must resolve. Dominant, tonic. And you always start with your tonic, your home key chord, not the unresolved dominant. When I demonstrated this with Rossini, that chord, you certainly can't end with it, and you can't start out of the blue with it either, certainly not in 1800, yet there it is. And with total confidence, Beethoven continues now with 2 more similar cadences. This one shifting to the minor key, and the third of them now, like so, leading to this. Aha, and we finally got our bearings, and we've arrived emphatically now in G major. Ta-da! There's only one problem. And that's the symphony is based in C major. G is the dominant, the polar key, and it must resolve G to C. Okay, so Beethoven now writes a lovely lyrical melody to bring us out of G and into C major. And G is here. And the music crescendos and expands into this. Stately, majestic chords. Now it pulls back just a bit and moves into the minor. But then it crescendos and reaffirms glorious C major. And still with G in the bass. Here's an ascending scale, which now quickly returns downward. And presto, or allegro con brio, our exposition begins.
What's really incredible, and as we see this with Beethoven's Symphony No. 1, is that he starts off with a bang. And he starts off with something that's really incredible, so that people on the first hearing is just hearing this dominant seventh chord. This dominant seventh is what begins this whole piece. And we also notice that it doesn't resolve to C major. It resolves to F major to begin with. And then he goes into talking about, okay, 5/7 of C to 7. So, and the piece hasn't even started yet, and we're already full of surprises, full of things. And Anna, as someone who's played a lot of Beethoven, how often is it that you start a piece of music by Beethoven and you have no idea where it's going to go, and that it's just a whole journey from the beginning, the first note?
Yeah, that's incredible that he started his cycle of 9 symphonies, which he didn't know. He was going to compose 9 of them.
Yeah.
That's true, but he started that journey into the monumental works, programmed works of symphonies with the dominant 7th chord. I don't know, Chris, if you know of another symphony which starts with a dominant 7th and then goes to another dominant 7th and goes to another dominant 7th chord. These are the unstable chords which require resolution, and he doesn't even start it in the original key of the symphony. This is very innovative.
Presto, or allegro con brio, our exposition begins. And so this magnificently structured introduction, which began with such ambivalence and then hovered around C major, has finally settled into that key for the exposition. And Beethoven, child of the Enlightenment and the classical style, would create a first symphony roughly equivalent to late Mozart and Haydn in its overall proportions, its style, and architecture. Moving on now to its textbook exposition. And already, Beethoven is using that Haydnesque technique of taking tiny motifs or cells and using them to build his structure. So in the first theme of this exposition, he takes 3 notes. G, the dominant, the B is the leading tone, which result to C, the tonic, bum, 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 and a snappy rhythm to provide energy. And then upward C major triad now. Here. With the leading tone, bum, bum, prominent. We move then into D minor, and the same thing repeats, but up a step, which now prepares us for a big, emphatic, extended C major episode. So what I'd like to do now is to play for you all of the main themes of the exposition, and then we'll hear them as they occur in the orchestra. First, the main theme in C major. It repeats in D minor, and then leads us back to C major with these dynamic chords, clearly related to those big, majestic chords from the introduction.
Yeah, this may appear like a standard, college music history lecture, where you get acquainted with what the material is and how it's comprised together to put into the. But I really love how Larry genuinely is enjoying the intricacies of the journey of this construction of the symphony, and he makes it so alive. I know both you and me, Chris, we went through the music history courses multiple times, right? And a lot of it sometimes may seem like, well, why do I even need to know it? Can I just enjoy the music, right? But this builds up because the exposition exposes the themes, and these are like characters in the novel. Symphony can be compared to a novel. So if you pay attention to the details about the characters as they appear in the first section of the novel, first 200-300 pages of it, I guess. So then the relationships and the development of the story starts making much more sense and becomes a much more enriching reading experience. Same thing with the symphony. It's not just a sit back on your couch and enjoy kind of music. It's not a background music. It's a music which calls for active participation. How can you participate better in something? Well, by following the plot.
Then the next theme of this group built on a C major triad and a descending scale, like so. Then a transition using the main theme, leading to the key of G major, the all-important dominant or polar key, and another theme also with a descending scale. A connecting theme. Now the secondary group of themes, all in the dominant key of G major, and as required by the sonata form, more lyrical in character, featuring now the woodwinds, like so. And notice, this theme is also built on a descending scale. These scales are everywhere, here, and even the main theme. Plus there's more. This graceful secondary theme is accompanied by the ascending triad figure we heard from the main theme, which now becomes this in the bassoon. So we have that accompaniment with the lyrical secondary theme, like so.
I think it's really a triumphant entrance of Beethoven as a composer to write not only in the key of C major, but also to introduce his character, himself, within these sort of very boisterous, joyful, and wonderful, optimistic themes that you hear. And it's all constructed in a really perfect way, I would say.
Very masterful, yeah.
Yeah, everything links, everything joins together so well. And upon first hearing, every theme seems to already be in its right place. There's nothing that's a bit too long. I think geometrically it's already really well crafted and structured, and so it's just pure joy. Even listening to it again, because you do repeat the exposition as performance practice, you don't find yourself, here's that long exposition all over again. It's this idea, let's do it again. And I think you're right that if you think of a symphony as a novel, and this kind of symphony is not a novel to be just trifled with and ignored. It's a really important statement by Beethoven.
Yeah, it's not a paperback boulevard kind of novel.
No, it's not sort of like a summer read that it's a quick read and you don't really hold on to the characters. This is his first published symphony that he really wants to put a stamp on. And you think about how so many of his earlier works are in C major. It's almost as if it's preceding this sort of the stem, like how can I play with this key of C major and produce themes that are not only easy for the ear to latch onto.
And you see how all these materials are bound together. They're related motivically in a subtle but organic sort of way. This is true symphonic writing. And this leads to the third major theme, also in G major. It's very energetic, almost boisterous in its precise, clipped rhythms. It's tough to do on the piano, but wait till you hear the strings play it. It is a brilliant, dashing theme. Now we have a minor key variant of the secondary theme, this one, like so, in the cellos and basses. And it continues to wind its way back to G major to close out the exposition with a vigorous return of the main theme. Or a variation of it. And Beethoven now takes the rising triad, this thing, and inverts it using these chromatic diminished chord harmonies, just for some extra added tension, leading back to G major for a brief and genteel closing. And the exposition ends emphatically in G major. So many amazing things bursting forth from Beethoven's mind.
With any great piece of art, there is always so much to be learned from how it's constructed and how it's crafted together in such a way that the more you know, it's not like it gets more boring or it loses its appeal or its shine. I think the more you know about Beethoven's music, the more you know about the symphony. And I've, conducted this first movement before, and to listen to it again doesn't make me feel as if, oh, here we go. I've heard this, been there, done that. It's actually just come more alive. It's music that somehow continues to live on. And I know this is very cliche for a lot of classical musicians. This piece grows on you, this piece is maturing in you, and you come to love it more as you grow. And I can't help but say that it is very true. And it's also sort of, I guess, like great pieces of music or great pieces of literature or great paintings that you revisit and you go and see again, and it has a different way of appealing to you, especially because of your life circumstances. So to understand Beethoven and his first symphony, as well as all the other symphonies that we've been doing so far, and to have that sort of depth, I'm sure if we had different conductors or different scholars talking about the symphonies, again, would learn something different. But can they deliver it the way that Lawrence Rapchak does? Not sure. But still, it's just this idea that we can continue to learn and understand a different perspective of these symphonies, and they don't cease to lose, since it doesn't cease to have its appeal upon us, and it continues to have that shine. I think that's really a great thing to be involved in.
Yeah, that's a really great thing to own, this possibility to connect with those masterpieces. They're masterpieces. Why? Because they really, really rich in what they in the goodies which they bring, and that is on all levels. On the level of feeling, we perceive this music as just feel-good music, and why? Because as Lawrence pointing out, it's made of the good elements, and it's constructed in a good harmonious way. And at the same time, you can step further and further in depth and learn more about the creator himself, and the Beethoven, and how he related and how he led his life, and how he channeled his life events and his life experiences into being creative. Now that's something anyone can relate to, because we all have life experiences, and we all have life circumstances, and we all struggle, just like Beethoven did, with making life obstacles into something other than the obstacle. So this is a good. I mean, you can go and peel that onion and go deeper and deeper in depth through this exploration, and find something which will illuminate and elevate your day or the whole life.
Yeah.
So here now is the exposition, beginning after the slow introduction, and I'll call out everything as it happens. Our main theme. It repeats in D minor. Now, a transition. And here are those dynamic chords. And a new theme with a downward scale. The main theme now has a transition. And a connecting theme. Ba-da-ba-ba-bum also has a descending scale. and our secondary theme. We're now in G major. And the ascending triad as accompaniment. And here is our third theme, bursting with energy. And here is the minor key version of the second theme, with an oboe obbligato. And the theme continues to wind its way in the cellos and basses. The main theme now. And the diminished chords, very intense. And a gentle closing in the dominant key of G major. And it will all repeat. It was standard practice to repeat the entire exposition so that the audience could hear all of the main materials again before plunging into the central development section.